this world most sustainable, and the companies with this kind of think in the future, you need to train the people. How different will be the world if our brain you are more ethical? How different? Probably very different. Just like I told you, just recently neuroscientists identified an area that relates with the human values, and we are far from solving the mysterious relationship between brain, mind, and conscientiousness. But we know something more. After this situation, we know that this part of the brain works with values. So, my idea here is, okay, we have a brain area related with values, but you need to train this area. And probably this conference is the start in this area is we need to train. But we need to go out this conference and put this in practice and put this kind of teaching in schools. We have a brain area that can be trained to be ethical. This is important to understand, okay? And leaders, communicators, education, human research professionals need to think about that and apply in the practice. So to be ethical, to be sustainable, to be all these things need to be trained in students, trained in people, and you just don't born like an ethical person. You need to be trained across your life. And neuroscience can help to respond to these questions. Ethical brain also is where we process the responsibility for the future. So if you discover that you have a brain, a part of a brain that processes the values and is ethical, you can train and apply in the future to make a better world. This way, we must learn to develop concepts, technologies, methods, plans, actions sufficiently efficient and to have a better future. So we have the potential, intelligence, and ethical in dealing with this challenge, but we need to develop them. Let me give you just a small example of a situation where we apply neuroscience to finance, trying to find more ethical decision, financial decision in the future. I work for several years and actually in the area of finance that is market efficiency, and we try to understand if the market are or not efficient. But if the market are efficient, why we have crisis? Why Europe is actually in so complicated financial problems? Why this happen also in the United States? Probably we need to understand how this happens. And we try to, this is just one experience that I'm trying to tell you. So we took 20 males and 20 females of volunteers, divided in two groups, two different groups. Each group made 50 decisions in one market. The first market is a growing market, but they don't know. When they start to simulate, to buy or sell stocks, they don't know what kind of market they have. The next 50 decisions have been made in the very volatile market, so up and down successively. This is the first group, start in the growing markets, 50 decisions, and after that was changed to the volatile market. The second group starts in the volatile market, 50 decisions, and after that change to another 50 decisions in the growing market. So two groups, 20 in one group, 20 in second group. look at that. And at the same time, during the round of decision, we capture the activity of the brain. So they are buy or selling in the computer, and at the same time, we capture the brain electroactivity. So you can see the first 50 decisions and the other 50. So this is, just look to the first line, and you can understand easily that the areas of the brain that they use after 10 decisions practically are the same. So these people learn how the market will grow in the future. So they think they learn. What happens? The market is growing. They are winning money, say, oh, I realize how the market will be in the future. So my decision will be this. Let's take a look. They use the same brain areas when they change, they don't know, but they change to second market that is valued. Okay? So take a look. In 5 decisions, they say, oh, I understand how this market will be in the future. So they capture and they use same brain areas. And they maintain until 50. They change to market 2, they take about 10 decisions again, and after that, they use same brain areas. Let's take a look at second market and second group that start to trade in first volatile market, and after that, made 50 decisions in second market, growing market. Look at that. And look, I'm just doing these 2 slides. The brain areas in the first line are practically the same after 10 decisions in the beginning. Look at that. They don't understand nothing about the market will grow or not grow. So the brain areas that they used across all the experiment are different. What does this mean? But amazing is the fact that they don't lose money. Practically all groups finish the simulation with same amount of money in the end. So the group 1 and group 2 receive in the end practically very similar amounts of money. So what we learn about that? They learn that our minds adjust to different situations. If they think that understand the trend of the market, they use some brain areas, but if they don't understand this, they use other areas of the brain to make the same decisions. And the amazing of amazing is they get the same amounts, practically no statistical difference between these 2 amounts. So it's amazing how the brain acts in the financial decisions. So what we conclude that if they understand, they use same strategy from the past to invest in the future, but if they don't find any trend, they use areas of the brain, different areas, to make more complicated decisions and try to adjust to not lose money. My conclusion about this presentation is, in business, it is crucial to find a new way of making grow your company, your country, etc. So you need to be the best, you need to survive, you need to get money to survive. Each country is similar. So we talk about some poverty in some areas of India, but you can have this around the world also. People try to survive, people try to be the best. So it's possible to do these kind of things in the next generations, and we have an area of the brain that is related with values. So we can be the best, probably thinking the other persons, thinking that we have kids, and these kids must be in this world in next 20, 50 or more years. So I think it's possible to be profitable as possible as, I think it's possible to have the same money, but thinking the other persons in the future, how they live in the future, not just living the life in next 2 or 3 years and just don't care about the other person. So it's important to think about business with thinking also the other person also will come in the future and need to survive also in the future. So is my presentation, and it's just the beginning. Like I told you in the beginning, we don't know practically nothing in this area. So thank you very much.
Now, before handing over the mic for the cultural evening to Saima, may I request our floor management team to prepare the stage for the culture program, please? You have the another? Okay.
First of all, good evening, namaste, and many thanks for allowing me to be here. There are two reasons for that. One, because then by being here, when I left Stockholm, the temperature was -13. It was all white because of snow. Here the temperature when I landed here was 20 degrees plus. So it's a difference. And secondly, I left India 43 years ago. And it's the first time I'm in Indian university afterwards. I've never been to any place, any other university in India after I left my bachelor's degree. Better late to be rather than never. So I am at present professor of marketing at Stockholm School of Economics. I'm sure that not very many people know here because it is located in the most northern part of this world, Sweden, which is a very small country, as you probably have heard some of it. Total population of Sweden is less than the population of Delhi town. So just keep this thing in mind. So. My subject is transnational corporations, government interaction. When I speak about transnational corporations and government interaction, I will be using social exchange theory. Now, this subject has been treated earlier in other subjects like economics, for example, in the area of lobbying, which is generally it is taken as a negative word. I won't put any values on that. Rather, I will go to social exchange theory and how I model government, business, or government, multinational corporation interactions. But in order to understand this or model multinational corporations and their exchange with governments, we have to look at that all these exchanges are influenced by, there are three aspects of it. One that I will be talking about, as you see here in the government TNC interaction. But basically all this is guided by a world in which we live today, which is institutionalized world. There are a lot of rules, a lot of agreements, code of conducts, and so on and so forth, which means that irrespective of which country it is, the interaction between governments and multinational corporations is guided by these international rules and these international conventions. I say there are code of conducts, there are trade agreements, WTO has, OECD has its code of conduct, then there are a number of other conventions that we have to understand in order to exchange what governments do and how they interact with the multinational corporations, and what multinationals do and how they interact with the governments. I won't be talking about that aspect so much because this is government exchange issue, which is outside my presentation. The second dimension, as you see here, is translational business. I will be coming, business to business dimension. I will be coming to some parts of it only in order to understand why governments and transnational corporations act the way they do. A second thing that I will point out here, that while I am talking about interaction, I'm talking about all interactions. Moral, immoral, that's another issue for me. I'm not interested on moral aspects of interaction. I won't be talking about legal or illegal either. They do take place, for example. You are correct if you say that, well, there are aspects which we shouldn't be, or we should be discussing, but we should not be accepting it. I also accept it, but they are there in exchange process. So I include those in my presentation. So let me go over then to the next. See, the triangle of government and multinational corporations. One can ask the question, first of all, of course, why governments need multinationals? Well, multinationals are needed because they have the technology, they have organization, and they have resources, financial resources, which they can transfer from one country to another country at a very short time, very efficiently. They may do it in different ways. If you look at total direct foreign investments in the world today, in a single year, it runs in billions and hundreds of billions of dollars. So even if some countries like India or China are less dependent on foreign direct investment by foreign countries or transnational corporations is required or asked for because of the fact that these are the resources commanded by multinational corporations. In order to, of course, understand that, we just widen the term resource by including managerial resources as well as financial resources of these countries or of these companies. So. Now, in any exchange, or in order to understand this interaction between governments and multinational corporations, we have to understand three different organizations that are involved in it. One, of course, as I mentioned earlier, transnational corporations themselves, who are endowed with huge amounts of resources of different types, as I mentioned earlier. And the multinational corporation of today looks, as I will probably have a picture, looks very differently than the organizations that existed before the First World War. A multinational corporation today operates from one country to 190 different countries. They are involved in production in certain countries, limited number of countries. Their design work is limited even in a fewer countries, generally in the home market. Distribution is throughout the world. So they come in, these companies are interacting with not one nation, one government, rather multiple partners, multiple governments, multiple organizations. And this is something that we have to understand whenever we talk about sustainability, because what is sustainability in one country is not necessarily the same in another country. But multinationals have to act according to these interactions. Now, the basic characteristic, which I will show you in a slide, of a multinational corporation is an economic animal. It's a commercial organization which invests abroad in order to get returns for its stakeholders, that is, shareholders. For that is, in order to do that, of course, they have to import things, bring in input, capital, finance, and different types of raw material. They transform it into products and then export it to the market. Market is the test of the success or the failure of a multinational firm. If market is not satisfied, stakeholders are not going to provide them the support they need, either because suppliers will not give them the components they need, raw material suppliers will not give them the material they need, and shareholders will not provide them the capital they need. That, I think, we have to keep it in mind. So let's call them commercial organization. The second part of that is what we can call as the participative organizations, namely the government as we see them as those represented in the parliament and the political parties. These are participative organizations because they function on a very different basis than the multinational corporation. Their political parties succeed, or they function on the basis of debate, where a political party, a government represents the conflicts in a society. It's an important part of the political process in any democratic society. Conflicts are there in each society, they have to be reflected, and they are reflected by the political parties, not by the multinational corporations. So these political parties are much involved in debate. there is never a very, what we can call as a strong ideology of this. Things change. As voters change, things change. And as the mood of voters change, so will also governments and the political parties. So each political party has a number of constituents. They are reflecting the different components of the society, conflicts in the society, and this is reflected in the debates that you have in the parliament, in the national assemblies, in the state assemblies, or in, if nothing else, in the lectures that politicians deliver to me and you on television, on public meetings. So the thing is that there is never an optimal solution to this type of situation, because of the fact that things keep on changing. It's a dynamic solution. The third part is the bureaucracy, or the bureaucratic organizations. That is the government bureaucracy that we see often from the clerk level up to the level of secretaries. They are called differently in different countries. So, these are rule interpreting and rule enforcing organizations. They don't make political decisions. Their primary responsibility is to take cues from the government or the politicians and the parliament, and then interpret them, formulate rules, and implement rules. These are, as a rule formulating, rule implementing organizations. Again, the principles on which they work are very different because they are not participating. Public doesn't interpret rules. Rules are interpreted by the bureaucracy. So, what I imply in that case is that the rationality behind these actors is different. One is economically rational, other ones are politically or have socio-political rationality in their mind when they function. And these have an impact on what organizations do and how these organizations function. So, which means that since these three types of organizations are different, so we have to understand from the social exchange theory point of view that in each of these exchanges that multinational corporations and governments are involved in, there is first of all a purpose. Since we are talking about commercial deals, that's what multinationals are about, there is always a purpose behind the deal. It can be very instrumental, getting licenses, for example, getting projects, for example, so on and so forth, or it can be very, very social type of thing. When it comes to multinational corporations, social aspects are less important in general. But if someone wants to, we have to understand, it is primarily in those social exchanges probably we see the cases of illegality, like bribery, for example. But otherwise, instrumental exchanges or instrumental dimensions are the most important one here. The second dimension is type of exchange, that is resources versus social exchange. As I mentioned earlier, resources, tangible or intangible resources are exchanged between the governments, the bureaucracy on the one hand, and the multinational corporations on the other hand. It can be, as I mentioned earlier, it can be licenses, it can be permits, it can be supply of electricity or whatever it is. But there is a resource exchange. And this resource exchange, again, from the social exchange point of view, has to be equal. Unequal exchanges do not last very long. Companies have to pay taxes in order to get benefits. Companies have to employ people or create employment if they want to survive. Otherwise, they will not receive the type of support they need from the government. So, in general, one can say, the social exchange theory will say that in one or the other way, exchange has to be balanced and equal. Not at all the times. It can change, it can vary from one point of time to another point of time. But it has to be equal. Then the third characteristic of these exchanges is that how often parties in these exchanges meet each other. That is frequency, density, there are a number of things that you can, durations and so on. Again, government people meeting multinational corporations to impress upon them, to get information, to give them information, and so on and so forth, on rules, on the coming policies, changes in the policies, and so on and so forth. So as a result, what you will see generally is that government and transnational corporations are in continuous interaction with each other. Before decisions are made, after decisions are made. Before decisions are made, in order to impress upon the government what policies are correct and what policies are incorrect or not so appropriate. After that, in order to how to interpret the rules, so that the bureaucracy can interpret the rules in a proper manner. So what you see generally, or what we see generally, is that very clearly that government and business, government and multinational corporations are in active interaction with each other for long durations rather frequently with each other. And this is the case everywhere. And this, in my opinion, is a very efficient way of doing business. If government and business keep at an arm's length distance, do not interact with each other, interpretation as well as formulation of policy formulation and policy interpretation and implementation is going to be pretty ineffective, inefficient. So from my point of view, probably some people will disagree with it. It's good that companies in general, and multinational companies in particular, meet, talk, and discuss issues with the governments. This is manufacturing. So. Now, then we come to another thing. I mentioned 3 different organizations in India. Now, what is the output of these organizations? I will distinguish between 3 different outputs that these organizations have. In each one, I would give them one of them. First of all, a political organization, a political party, a parliament, what is the main output of such an organization? I will call talks. We often say, other politicians, both there, they talk, and that's true. Output, one of the biggest output of a political party as well as a parliament is talks. Now, is it good? Well, talk is a very efficient strategy because it's very inexpensive. You can change it. You can deny it. Fine. Most of the talks, they die afterwards because as people change their mind, as society is changing their mind, you can change it. So it doesn't cost political parties or politicians or the parliament to engage in this type of thing. It's not a bad strategy. It's an extremely good strategy because it's inexpensive, it's flexible. 2 things of the best that you can get. As I said, you can change it, you can deny it, you can misinterpret it or interpret it in a different manner. You can always say that, well, I was misquoted. And this is what happens often. And this is the case again when it comes to multinational companies. The second is decisions. Bureaucracy, for example, they decide, they make decisions. That is their rationality. This is their output, first of all. They are expected to make decisions by following rules and regulations. And in that decision-making, once I said that, they need context and so on. And finally, you have decisions. Multinational corporations are action-oriented organizations that lead to a certain output at a certain point, so that they can exchange that output. So the 3 organizations that I was talking about are having 3 different bases for existence, 3 different purposes, and as I said, 3 different strategies for tackling it. And therefore, we will see certain types of certain conflicts and certain other problems in these types of organizations. So if I summarize this part, where is that? We have 3 organizations. Commercial organizations, they exist, or transnational corporations, they exist because of economic efficiency, and their source of justification for existence is the market. Political organizations, their legitimacy comes from, or existence comes from the social side, and the society is the one that makes the judgment from that. And then you have bureaucratic organizations based on rules and regulations, that is procedural, and they give you